Okay, hello everyone. Welcome back to the Indigenous Futures Research Center Research Symposium here at Fourth Space. For our last panel of the day, Community in the Center, Indigenous Ways of Doing Research. And I'm going to pass it over to our moderator for the panel, Coordinator of Indigenous Community Engagement at the Office of Community Engagement here at Concordia, Geneviève Sioui. Geneviève, over to you.
Thank you, Doug. Hello, everyone. My name is Geneviève. I'm Wendat from Wendake, and today I'll be moderating. But before I do so, I just want to give a little bit of context for the panel so that you understand what we're talking about. So I work here at Concordia in the Office of Community Engagement. I'm the coordinator for Indigenous Community Engagement. And every year I've been running a program which is called Community Engaged Learning Fund for Indigenous Students, but that we should call, in short, SELFIES. And it's a program that supports Indigenous students who are doing their grad studies, so either their master's or PhD. And we give them an award for up to $6,000 for them to be able to do community-based research and to implement Indigenous research methods. The funding, the money comes from the Shift Center for Social Transformation, where you're going to go after this panel for the little reception, hopefully. And we distribute and manage the funding. Our next round of funding is in March for those who are Indigenous grad students interested in the program. And the idea with the program is to really support students in anchoring their work in communities. And facilitate using Indigenous research methodologies, so either doing land-based research, being able to work in reciprocity, being able to honor cultural protocols when you're doing research in your work. These things take time, they take money and resources, so we're trying to fund these kinds of activities. And so the idea for today was to gather the 6 students who got funding in 2024, so for this year, and to really focus our conversation on doing community engaged research. What does that look like? What are some of the challenges, and what are some of the impacts that we hope this kind of research can bring? So that's who we'll hear from. We'll hear from the 6 wonderful students. So to start, we're going to do a little round of introductions. So I'll just ask you to introduce yourself and maybe give the audience an overview of what your research interests or focus is. And then we'll go in with questions more about the community aspect.
Thank you, Geneviève. Tansi Kiowal, Dishinakashun Victoria May, Dushchin, Prince Albert, Saskatchewan, Treaty 6, Niwikin Jojage, Lima Michifnia, Mafami, Shinakashun, Vermet P. Delorme. Hi, everybody. My name is Victoria May, and I'm Michif, Red River Métis. My family come from Treaty 6 from outside Prince Albert, Saskatchewan, from the road allowance called, at the time, the Fox Farm. Now it's called Nordale. And my dad was a settler from Ontario. I live here in Jojage. I'm a professional dancer, a mom, community organizer, and my family names are Vermet and Delorme. My research focuses on Métis contemporary dance. I've been a contemporary dancer for the most part of my life, and with this project, I've been able to focus in on beginning the interviewing or conversational process and how dancers communicate and share and ways of knowing within the studio, I'd say within a worldview of Keyogewen. I'm also threading in the topic of futurisms, Métis futurisms, and working with belongings and objects in galleries and museums created by our Métis grandmothers. So, thank you.
Super, thank you.
Kwekwe, everyone. My name is Véronique. I'm Wendat from my father's side, a member of the community of Wendake, about 3 hours northeast from here. And I've been working in the research and community fields I was actually counting the years. I was like, oh, it's almost 10 years now. And I learned a lot. I'm currently working within a research chair that does a lot of collaborative, participatory research with Indigenous youth organization, Indigenous youth in Quebec. And all that experience kind of led me to doing my PhD, which centers around young women's expressions of leadership and manifestations of leadership, various forms of leadership, and how can those different forms of leadership be valued and seen and recognized. And I'm using a lot of teachings coming from the Wendat teachings of the circle and matricentric principles as well. And I think I'll keep it at that for now.
Hi, everybody. My name is Juliet Mackie. I'm Métis. My family is from Fort Chipewyan, Alberta, and is connected to Red River. I grew up on Vancouver Island, and I've lived in Montreal, Tiohtià:ke for this is my 10th year. And I'm a PhD student in the Indie program. I'm a painter and a beadwork artist, and my research explores portrait painting and storytelling while looking at identity and representation of Indigenous women and Two-Spirit people. And yeah, I think I'll leave it at that for now.
Well, Sego Sewa Guego. If you guys have been here since the morning, you might already know my name. But my name is Iako'tsi Amanda Lickers. I'm a Seneca of Six Nations of the Grand River. And I actually have a little bio. I'm just going to straight up read it. I'm a designer, pedagogue, and multimedia artist whose work it reflects on the interconnected relationship of land and body sovereignty. I'm currently a master's student at Concordia University, and my research creation reflects on Ngwehui land-based futures, weaving visual storytelling, Indigenous sciences, necropolitics, and design sovereignty. The project I applied for with the selfies was to actually produce a case study looking at building a permanent cultural space at Bâtiment 7 for the work that we're doing as I'm part of a collective, the Buckskin Babes Urban Moose Hide Tanning Collective. Yeah, thank you.
Hi, I'm Qillasiq Lussier. I am an Inuk student at the PhD program. PhD program in the individualized program. And my project consists of breathing new life into Inuit oral histories from the Avatak Cultural Institute that we have here in Tiohtià:ke that are not very accessible to Nunavimmiut. So I want to work with youths to implement arts-based methodologies so that they can embody those stories and learn new skills. And it's going to be so much fun. Thank you for having me.
Thanks, everyone. I think there's a sixth person who is not online, eh? Okay, so the other student who received funding through selfies is called Harriet Ransom. Harriet is a teacher, and she was emailing me this morning that she's been feeling ill, so I think that's probably why she wasn't able to connect. So I'm gonna send her some thoughts for her quick recovery, but I'll just read her bio for you to know that she's a PhD candidate. She's a full-time Mohawk language teacher in Akwesasne. She's Bear Clan, was born and raised in Akwesasne. Both her parents and grandparents are fluent speakers, also from Akwesasne, and she's been teaching the language for 27 years. And her research is about exposing the obstacles that prevent her nation and the youth specifically from revitalizing their language and culture in the public school system. So you'll see we have some photos going in the background, and the first few photos are images of activities that Harriet has been organizing in her community so that the youth can engage with some of the traditional like craft making and practices, but also obviously teaching the language. So she's not able to be here, or maybe she'll join us a bit later, but I just really wanted to acknowledge her as the sixth recipient of the award. So for now, we're gonna get started with some questions about community engagement. We don't necessarily have to go, we can go in a random order when you feel compelled to speak. But I would like to know what what role does community play in your research? Like, how do you understand doing research with and alongside community? And I think you could even be specific and say which community or like community of peers maybe you're working with. So does anyone want to break the ice? We've rehearsed, so thank you, Christine.
Okay. So what I plan to do is I've been working with Inuit youths in Nunavik, specifically in Qillasiq, where I lived several years before moving down south here. Sometimes with Inuit youths in foster care, and the way that I want to work with community members is to work with Inuit artists and elders so that they can kind of help us figure out which oral histories are the most appropriate to use within this research. Because sometimes using archives, it's, the whole thing about consent, it's kind of tricky. So I was thinking, I want to involve community members in that way, and to have the youths also get something out of research other than just having honoraria for them or their families or something like that. A bit something more, not just something else, that being part of it. A collective process is what I would like in that way.
I'll continue. I forgot to say that I have a background in criminology. I have my bachelor and my master, and I'm saying this because my first introduction to research was very, very different than my work experiences, what led me to do community research. I'd never done that before and never studied that before. And so I learned a lot through working in the community and through working after that again in research, that's why I decided to do my PhD, is because I wanted my school experience to embody a community-based research, because I don't believe that although I learned a lot, I don't believe that my past experiences in school embodied that. So for myself, I think the project I want to do, I don't think I could do it without people, without community. I think, and it's been kind of there's a lot of questioning that comes into play with that, and I think I could feel very biased to my own experience if I would lead my project without other people, community. And when I say community, I mainly include a group of young First Nation women, Wendat women, and also other First Nation women in Quebec. So the goal with the group is to, I guess, create a collective film that will intertwine our various experiences and stories of leadership in the hope to create a collective story that embodies those different stories. I don't know if it makes sense, but in my head it does. And the goal is to kind of move away from Western or patriarchal idea of or understandings of leadership, which I think we see a lot in our own decisional systems in our own communities. This is a need that I identify throughout my own professional and personal experiences, but also by discussing it with community. So I'm very excited to be able to use those funds because there's the flexibility into how we can distribute those funds. So I think it shows a lot of trust into an Indigenous-led project, and I'm very happy about it.
Thanks. So yes, what does community mean to me? It means a lot of things, and I feel like there's a lot of circles and there's a lot of overlapping. I guess I'll speak to, at this time, the Indigenous community of contemporary dancers that are based in Montreal, which I would say is quite emergent. I've been connected to and connecting with Barbara Daibo, who's Mohawk, Ivani Malo, who's Wolastoqey, Lara Kramer, Oji Cree, and so forth. And people have been kind of in their own pockets. And it's been late in Montreal and Quebec to sort of come together. We have a collective called Makohatine, which means let's gather in Wolastoqey. So this has been a real center point for me, and it's been a way for me to approach and reflect on my experiences that I've had as a dancer for over 30 years. And just actually thinking of concept of like ethics, consent, accountability, like we research all the time in dance, whether or not that includes those like terms and like healthy ways of being together all the time. I'm not sure, and it's forced me to pause and reflect on my own experiences and also what I'm carrying and bringing forth in all the projects I'm doing. So it's been a really great like segue for me, and I find that I'm held accountable. We all are through this like these pockets of like Indigenous artists that I'm collaborating with, in conversation with, and then I wanted to, for my research, dive down a little bit more into like Métis, with Métis contemporary dancers. Not many of them are located in this area of the country, unfortunately, so that does mean some travel. Because I wanted to find out what like similarities we have in our Métis worldview, Kyoge-win, Wakota-win, that blends into the creation of our dance performances and our processes. So yeah, I've found that I came to academia quite late, in my mid-40s, so it's been interesting to reflect on what I've been doing the whole time, but naming certain things and really honing in on, as I said, like the ethics of how we work with each other and like extractive processes that I've been part of and I don't want to continue. So I'm constantly taking like one step forward and two steps back, so.
So my project is also rooted in community. I'm focusing on the stories of 8 Indigenous women and Two-Spirit folks in Montreal who are already part of the same community kinship network that I am, the urban Indigenous community. And it was important to me to, when selecting people to be involved in my project, that it was people that I already had pre-existing relationships with because of the intimate nature of the conversations and stories that we're sharing. So that was an important aspect for me, but also I wouldn't be able to do my project without these people and their stories. So I really thought a lot about how I can make this experience reciprocal, and I didn't want the people in the project to feel as though I was tapping them for their information or for their knowledge. So in my project, I have conversations with the participants, and we talked about various topics around identity, cultural belonging, connection, relationships, and based on these conversations, I'm painting portraits of each person, well, co-curating with them how they wish to be represented in this way. And then at the end, I'll be gifting the painting to the participant. So I hope that it feels reciprocal and that we're all benefiting from this and no one is being taken advantage of or anything unethical. I also, my project started from my own feelings around, or experiences around cultural belonging and feeling connected and wanting to feel more connected to my culture through beadwork. So for me, learning to bead was really important in how I started thinking about these topics. And the experience for me prompted questions around what does this look like for other people in my community, whether it's beading or another art form or just, family, language. I was interested in talking to people about what this looks like for them. So it's also rooted in community in that way, in a broader sense. Yeah, there's probably other ways too, but that's probably what I'm thinking about right now.
So first, I think someone in the chat asked the name of the award is the Selfies, CELFIS, and it's distributed by the Office of Community Engagement. So you guys are lucky that I saw that. How else would we know? But so for myself, one of the things, there's a couple things. One thing that makes this award very unique is that it's by and for Indigenous folks within an academic and researching setting, which is extremely important because in order, like, we're engaging often with Indigenous methodologies and Indigenous knowledge systems, and those things wouldn't exist without the people who have kept those alive over over generations since time immemorial. So for us, like, interconnectivity, and even as a Haudenosaunee person, you know, like decision-making and collective decision-making, the role of women in our communities, it's all very central. And for my research, I'm part of a collective. So this is not just my work alone. This is the work of my collaborators and my peers, as well as our elders and our knowledge keepers, and also participants and learners. And so there's like a network of high tanners who are engaged in maintaining these practices and bringing them into the future. And in order to do that, we have to honor where these knowledge systems have come from. And so I think that the Western academia and the way that we view research, you know, I mean, that's one of the first things we learn about. We read Linda Smith, you know, and talk about how research is this colonial tool. And so I think that there are sometimes limitations to subverting those colonial dynamics, and it's something that we have to constantly be pushing against to create equity when there is a power relationship as a researcher, even though if you belong to community. So I think that there's sometimes a lot of opportunism that takes place as well, and so it is important to hold each other accountable and try to push those boundaries. But that's not a very popular thing either. So it could affect your SHRC funding. No, I'm just kidding. But thankfully we have selfies. No, because not everyone does get a SHRC, right? Not everyone is able to apply on time or for whatever reason. Also, there's finite resources. So the fact that there's something that's designed specifically for Indigenous researchers, and also, like, I don't know if you guys have ever tried trying to get like an elder to sign like a consent form. Good luck to you. We're gonna get their bank account number, their SIN. That is tough. And so selfies, because there's flexibility, it bridges some of those gaps. So I think that it's very innovative, and I'm really grateful that it exists here at Concordia. Thank you.
Thanks for the promo, Amanda. Did you want to add something, Vero, or yeah?
Oh, yeah, I think it's interesting because if anyone has ever written a grant application or a scholarship application, they're very selective and they're very restrictive. You know, I have a lot of I don't know, like a love-hate relationship with the word merit, like who deserves a scholarship, who deserves funding, who doesn't. And I think that idea of, you know, being based on merit is very on the surface of what merit is. So that's why I really like also selfie, is that acknowledgement that merit is not, I mean, it's not based on merit, it's based on community. What are you doing for your community? And it's based on reciprocity. So yeah, that's what I wanted to add.
I just wanted to add, I didn't really speak about my selfies funding, what I use the money for. So I wanted to mention that I, with this project, I hosted a beading circle at my house with the intention of exploring in more depth Métis kitchen table methodology, which is a methodology that I'm using in my research. So I just wanted to have a nice day of beading and visiting, food, music, lots of laughs. So that's where this funding really came in hand to bring this to life. And yeah, it was I'm so grateful for that day because it was a really, really wonderful experience. And I got to create beading kits for people so that they could, take supplies home and continue working on projects. And also honorarium for them as well for their time. But yeah.
I think I'm really appreciating all of the love for selfies, and it's making me blush because I honestly didn't ask them to be like, bump up the program. But we know each other also, and I think there's something in our relationship of being able to appreciate each other. But I would like to maybe, a lot of you have named some methodologies or some principles or values like reciprocity, relationality, being accountable, which are all very important, I think, principles when you're doing Indigenous research. So I want to ask you how you're upholding those principles, and I think you can be as concrete and specific as you want, like Juliet just did, of really being I'm hosting people and this is how we're building a connection by sitting down and having food together. So I'd like to hear how these principles are showing up and how you're respecting them in your research. Christine, do you want to get us? Yeah?
Again. How am I going to do research?
What are some of the important
Right?
principles for you, and how are you going to uphold them?
Well, I'm in Inuit oral history, so I want it to be kind of like a visiting thing. We've always learned by oral methods of transferring knowledge. I want to just host spaces where we can have a together place to learn together with people from different generations. And I think that I didn't say also how I use the funds, or how I will use the funds again. People who have been to Nunavik know how expensive it is. So I wanted to not only offer a space where we can be together in the community, but go out on the land that happened. I went with my nieces and nephews, and we just spent the day like that, and went on an ATV and spent the day together, and then came back and had food with my grandparents. And I think that I spoke about it enough, right? Reciprocity with the youths, but especially I think that I'm gonna figure out probably how to work with community members to select the oral history archives, and to respect and value that kind of expertise of navigating familial sensitive ties in the community. I think that I have to think about what group of youths that I want to work with, either youths who are in Nunavik who don't have access to the oral histories, or youths in foster care who I already work with currently, who are very far removed from community and who have access to those kind of stories. So I think that it's just going to be visiting for the most part until I can.
No, I was just going to say, I'm hearing that when you say you'll have to choose, but the idea is not that you're not making that decision yourself, but that you're making that decision collectively with people who you consider community.
Yeah, and probably the elders are going to be like, yeah, this is, depending on if I work with elders from here or there, they're probably going to be across Nunavik. Maybe they'll say, I think that this is more important for our community, our youths, to have access to these, because many elders have family members in foster care who think that that is the most appropriate use of resources that are limited, and not many opportunities come around like that. So I'm thinking, yeah,
So for myself, a couple of things. The first, one of the sort of guiding principles for me is the validating and valuing of Indigenous knowledge systems through, a lot of time we use arts-based practices. In this case, it's focusing around hide tanning work, so it's a land-based practice, but really recognizing that our knowledge systems have a lot of the answers that we're searching for when we're trying to get through this sort of dystopian present into some hopefully positive future. And another key piece is reciprocity and the give back component. And so part of that with my project is I'm developing a case study. So looking critically at, from like an ethnographic perspective of an Indigenous co-design of a permanent cultural hub. The site is Bâtiment 7 in Point St. Charles, and the collective is Buckskin Babes, Urban Moose Hide Tanning Collective. And so I hope to be able to share this, as a resource, as a case study for as decolonizing design, is starting to become more and more normalized within mainstream, like urban planning and architecture. And even when we're imagining like our futures, whether they be virtually or in terms of our present materiality, what do those things look like, and how do we go about those things? And so I think having an opportunity to do a review, like a case study where I can, share what was our process, what was our methodology, what worked, what didn't work, and how do I hopefully, create that future. And it's also not something that can be done individually, ultimately, like in terms of the goal of what we want to create, it's through community, it's through, fellow engagement. We can have, trying to do a hide by yourself, it's going to take a very long time. And so having community part of that in that learning, and some of that knowledge is not even going to be transmuted into a Western academia. A lot of those knowledges stay outside of those systems, and that doesn't make them less valid. So I think it's also, there's a politics of refusal as well, of like, do we have to assimilate to Western modes of being in order to be valued as researchers and as contributors academically or artistically? And how much can we push back against those boundaries?
Did one of you want to comment on the principles that are sort of central to your research? Or alternative question, what are some of the challenges maybe of like involving community when you do research?
Yeah, because I think a lot of the guiding principles have been named, and it goes for me too. I think there's a lot more positives than there are challenges of working with community. Otherwise, it just feels like it's ingrained in the work that I do, and I want to continue doing. I think one of the challenges for me personally, and I don't know if others are feeling the same, but it was that idea of to avoid unintentionally exploiting my collaborators, but also their knowledge and their experiences. Because I'm doing this research, yes, it's community-based, but I'm doing it for my PhD. I'm doing it within an institutional framework at the university, and I really need to be transparent about that. I don't think I can avoid that transparency, that idea of throughout the process always validating if I'm doing things in a good way or if someone's feeling uncomfortable, if this moment that happened between us, it stays between us, those are important moments that happen when you do community-based research, and you're like, no, this is not research that we're doing right now. We're connecting, and so yeah, that's one of the things for now.
I want to ask you just a follow-up question before I pass it to you. Vero, I know that you're starting, so maybe you might not have an answer yet, but I'm curious to know if you have thought of how you're going to sort of renew that consent with your collaborators, with who, like that group of First Nation women that you want to work with. You say you want to check in and make sure that they're not feeling exploited. Do you have ideas of how you're going to be able to check in around that consent, like over time?
Well, I think prior, during, after, I think there's just that idea of care that makes, but I mean, you don't have to just be like, oh yeah, of course I'll do this, but I think I need to be a bit more constructive into how I will make sure that I apply that care and that transparency to make sure that consent is always, how do you say this?
Continuous? Like
Continuous,
renewing
but
consent?
also,
Renewed?
yeah, but no, that's not the word. Not blind. How do you say it in English? Informed. Thank you. Informed continuously. So yeah, I haven't thought about this, but I have thought about that idea of exploitation and transparency and those power dynamics. So yeah, thanks.
It's hard to go at the end because they've said so many incredible things
But
that I want to
we're not
add
done
to.
yet.
I know it's not the end.
We
but
have
like,
more time.
There's just like it's an accumulation of like amazingness that I don't want to mess up. So yeah, I just wanted to speak to like the guiding principles and thinking about like for me being clear as a researcher in community to situate myself very clearly and to consistently speak from this is where I come from, this is who I am, and these are my limitations. And also checking that the research is really necessary, because I can be interested in all kinds of things. But it's like, if it's not necessary, if it's not wanted, if it's not, for sure, if there's no reciprocity, but if it's not meaningful, then I will find something else. So I feel like this, the funding from Selfies has been really important to explore what that means. What is necessary and how am I going about it? In my field, there's a lack of literature about Indigenous contemporary dance, let alone Métis-centered contemporary dance practices written by and for us, because there's a lot of non-Indigenous folks who have written extensively on the subject, and it's great, but it's not exactly, it's not infused with our spirit. So I try to not use those as primary resources, and it's come to my understanding that there really is a need for this research to be, and our work to be written about and shared in that way. Yeah, so I'd say the challenges, and also, of course, because of the ban on our cultural practices for all those decades, has led to, in dance, the building up of dance companies and communities and connections that we do not have, we're not on equal footing as Indigenous people. So, yeah, so there's like the non-Indigenous folks that want to bring us into projects because of tokenism and not quite understanding and sort of as add-ons. So it's to try to like push that aside or say thanks but no thanks. We're building something on our own that's rooted in our worldview and what we need as a community. Because what I think might be necessary may not be what the youth think are important. So I never really got to talk about what I'm using the Selfies funding for. It's still underway. I'm working on a process of creating like an interview protocol for myself and for my interviewees, because like as dancers, like we dance with our bodies and we communicate with our bodies and we, yeah, we speak through a physical process that isn't always adequately captured if we're sitting at a table, even in Keogewin with our tea. It's not the same thing as being in a studio. So for the first part of my Selfies project, I've done kind of a prototype of interviewing process with 2 dancers from Montreal, and then I inflicted this process on myself, which was really telling. I was like, oh, some of it I liked and some of it I disliked. So I'm sort of taking the good and leaving the less great aspects of what I worked on, and I'm continuing to develop that. Lucy Fowler, who's a Two-Spirit Métis scholar out of Winnipeg, wrote her dissertation on Two-Spirit youth, Métis youth and hip-hop, and storying hip-hop, which was really interesting. And she used a voice-centered relational methodology for the interviews. So I'm working on exploring that as a process. So that includes standard sitting and having conversation. And then I moved that into more of an embodied process. Like for what she did, it was listening to the interviews and looking and listening for the cadence of the voice and the story and analyzing it through that process. Since that's not my background, I decided to try to involve that through a process of embodiment. So for the dancers to listen to their story, what they shared with me, once in a room so I could hear it, and once the dancer just had it on headphones. So that was, again, one of these parts that I wasn't sure what would work better or what worked less. So yeah, it was really interesting. We had the first iteration was a narrative interpretation, and then the second one was thinking of the words more of as a score. And it was quite interesting, just in the three interviews I did, the similarity in the outcome. I know for myself it was difficult to dance to the sound of my own voice, not listening, but just moving to the rhythm, the volume. And yeah, so I'm working with that with the goal to find out from Métis dance artists out west and elders what's necessary, like where am I needed at this point? Because yeah, there's a big gap in our literature and our written research, so it's to find a cohesive and Métis way to fill that.
Super interesting. And I think I want to go back to your first points around like validating sort of the research topic that you were interested in, but validating it with community. And I want to ask the others, what was your starting point also? Like, how did you decide to work on this topic? Was there something, what was like the community need or priority that you were trying to work on? And maybe you could also include in your response, like the looking in the future, like post, you'll be writing your thesis. It's going to be somewhere in this system, in this institution. But what are you hoping that your project can like impact, or like thinking about the longevity of all of this knowledge that you're going to have been like exploring? So the starting point and maybe the looking forward.
I think I got nourished by anger and injustice, and I think that's what fed my desire to explore themes of spaces, of leadership, of recognition, value, or the lack of all those things. Yeah, so that's how the need came to be, is legitimate anger coming from myself, but also by sharing and exchanging with others, seeing that anger in others, and how can we transform that anger into one positive outcome. So yeah, and the impact, I think there is, in terms of research, I think there's impacts, like different types of impacts. In terms of research, I think what I want to do is showcase how young First Nation women, through a group of young First Nation women, how do they live their leadership? And how can we value those many forms of leadership? I think sometimes people don't see themselves as leaders because they're not super outspoken, or they lack confidence, or they don't fit into that kind of mold. But they always make sure that everyone has water. They always make sure that everyone feels at home, feels safe, feel comfortable. They don't talk much, but they create a space. So I think it's about valuing those types of leadership also in research. I also want to, one of the other impact is how identity can play a role in shaping leadership, and how reconnecting or connecting more with our cultural teachings can, shape a different types of leadership for the future. I think we are a contemporary people, and our leadership can be rooted in both ancestral or cultural context, but also in contemporary context. And beyond that too, I think another impact is on the people that will be part of that process. I think it's extremely important that they feel empowered by the process. And also for the people that will see the film and or read the research, I want them to look at their own, those young women look at their own contribution, everyday contribution within their family or their community or any other areas of life, and see how this helps shape a path for others, and how this is their role in that circle, and that all the roles can be different, but they need to be valued and respected. So, yeah.
Well, I wasn't going to say necessarily anger, but hearing you speak, I realized, yes, there's some anger that motivated my project as well, mostly frustration around growing up with a lot of, in mainstream society, there's so many negative representations of Indigenous women, in movies or, whatever media, and just feeling like frustrated with that lack of positive or accurate representation. So part of my goal with this project was to, with working alongside the participants, to co-create these more positive, holistic representations that hopefully would reflect how we actually want to be seen or represented. And to me, this sort of challenges these other negative representations or stereotypes in this history by reconsidering it or remapping what it might look like. So that was one aspect of my motivation. The other, like I mentioned before, was motivated by my experience learning how to bead and what an impactful experience that was in my life, and the connection and community that it brought. So it prompted questions: how do other people, where do they find this connection? Where do they find ways to feel a strengthened sense of cultural belonging? What does that look like? So that also motivated a lot of the direction of my conversations with participants. Yeah, lots of different things that brought me here.
For myself, actually, the Selfies award was a time where I shifted my research focus. So where did I start out? I kind of started out in a bit of a different area where I decided to explore this other avenue because it was something I was already doing. So I was like, okay, hold on. Let's try to, and so I think too, for other like folks who are in graduate school or thinking about doing graduate school, it's valuable to work on something you might already be doing. Like if you're an artist, your artistic practice, or things that you're really passionate about in your community, and having those align with, things that you find yourself already doing, it is really helpful. And also, how did I get to that point was actually through community. It was through, the work of like folks like Autumn Godwin and Brooke Rice, who had started to, really push this urban access for land-based practices, and the important need that fills for urban folks. And just that whole experience, the sort of ripple effect of the last 4 years of the expansion of Buckskin Babes and that relationship with Bâtiment 7, and then evolving into a permanent cultural hub that's going to be, it's still a bit in the colonial box, but it's a form of land back. So there is a huge ripple effect, and just all the relationships that we've been able to create through our collaborations with post-secondary institutions, like the Office of Community Engagement. Vero, your office came by a couple times in the past, and at Concordia, and also like the CEGEPs and the urban Indigenous population for folks. It's been really powerful. And then, so that's sort of like, so it was also being willing to be flexible with my own research and to sort of revision and be strategic to shift to something that's going to benefit like my trajectory as much as possible, while also balancing like my roles and community and responsibilities. And a case study in my work in decolonizing design, like with the Rouge and working with Turo, I talked about it a little bit this morning, but we looked at case studies and looking at other, because a co-design is place-based, it's site-specific. And so there's a lot of place-based research, Miranda talked about that earlier, that goes into it. And so there's specific cultural protocols and considerations. And in our case, it's also a remediation where it's an old CN rail yard that is, so there's all of these things going on. And so being able to look at different examples of how people do it and taking that spirit of pushing boundaries against the, sort of the colonial boxes and putting it on, this is using the colonizer's tools, but, that good old black and white piece of paper and writing it down actually has a lot of power, because then people can point to that and say, well, this is how they did it here. This has already been done. And it validates that process. So I think it's also finding ways to, trick the system into validating knowledges that are inherently subversive to the dominant society, because, those dominant mechanisms are not there to support you, right? So we have to constantly be creative. Thank you.
I'm your biggest fan. That is so well said. That is so well said. This is freaking me out. So I'm just gonna address you, but I'm addressing all of you. The genesis. I was working at Avatak Cultural Institute, and the archivist there was saying we should be having these stories out there. And the more that I was reading them, the more that I was thinking, I can't be the only person reading this. This is crazy. Like, our ancestors and like people from my community, like people from my family, it's crazy. And I thought we should really be doing that. And to what you were saying, I was already working with the youths. When I was teaching in Nunavik, I was a teacher, and I don't know how to teach. I don't have a teaching degree, but I still went there to teach. And I realized that the curriculum is very much at our discretion. We can have a lot of leeway. And I was seeing my peers teaching, and I realized it's not every class that will allow space to have Inuit knowledges or Inuit stories and things like that. So I thought it could be very ideal to be working with the youths and have them have reference points so that they can recognize themselves either in school or out of school. And also, there aren't a lot of Inuit scholars talking about our issues. Most of the things that I've been reading was from anthropologists and ethnographers, and I was thinking, we need our methodologies recognized. Like when I read Joanne Archibald talk about story work, I want our methodologies to be recognized in Western spaces. Heck yeah, that's what I want. I want future Inuit youths to recognize themselves in academia and be like, oh yeah, we can do stuff with our knowledges, even in spaces that have historically made us feel like we don't, we don't have as much representation. We don't really talk about Inuit oral history. I didn't even know what oral history was when I went into my program. It was another Inuk, the only other Inuk in academia, Heather Iluluti, thank you, wherever you are.
On the West Coast.
On the
She
West
is.
Coast, yeah. We miss you.
Yes.
But I think that's how and where and why I do the work that I do.
Amazing. Very inspiring. All right. Yeah, go ahead. And then we'll open it for questions.
Oh, yeah, just to continue, I think anger comes in. In Dr. Igloliarte's class, we studied, we were looking at different art histories, and I was like, where's the dance? And thinking about like a recent production, at least in the last 10 years, of the Royal Winnipeg Ballet's Going Home Star, which was very controversial and like, though beautiful in many ways, very disappointing and at times like traumatic for Indigenous folks to watch. So that sparked in me like an anger to have to think about, well, what would you do differently? And so I wrote a manifesto, which I spoke and said yesterday. So that sort of like sparked and like moved into a new like emotion or another emotion of like hope. So you asked, what do I have hope for the outcome to be? And like I hope for like the youth, like Indigenous youth, whether it's like dancers, Métis youth, to look at my research creation, whatever it may be, and the writing, to see themselves in it. And that's only going to be possible by continuing to ask, fold in, and challenge myself with really what is the necessity. So I was thinking back to a kitchen table talk during the pandemic. That was my first one, I would say. Well, officially like that, where we call it Keogewin, with Dr. Sherry Farrell-Wissett and Kathy Meadows. And Sherry told the story about sewing moccasins and how if you're out on the land and they're not sewn correctly, water gets in and you freeze, and it's not good and can lead to death. So she literally said, a stitch can save a life. And I thought, oh, it's so connected to dance, how we move, how we create. I mean, maybe if you miss a dance step, you're not going to die, but you could become seriously injured, and also in the construction of our materials. So that became like a metaphor for me in terms of like how I approach the words I write, the steps I choose, and how the words I choose to put into this world with my, with the work I do with the youth and so on. And right now, I have the opportunity to sit with and visit with grandmother belongings at the McCord Museum, and like approaching that situation with care and thinking about the hope that they had for us when they made these belongings. And so I'm sitting here thinking about transforming anger to hope, and how we really are like tomorrow's grandmothers, and what we're putting in motion, whether it's beadwork or other works of art or hide tanning initiatives and collections. It's that we're laying those foundations for tomorrow.
Perfect. Tiaweng for this nice way of ending on a very positive note. Perfect. I want, please, everyone to applaud this wonderful group of people who are so inspiring. And thank you truly for accepting to do this panel. I personally find a lot of inspiration, and I learn a lot alongside, à côté de vous. I've known you for a few years now, and I feel like I'm always learning more. And I think now it's time for questions. If people have questions or comments, or...
Does anyone in the audience have a question? Anyone online?
Alicia? She said she was going to be our biggest cheerleader. No, she doesn't. I'm joking.
Maybe just like the camera, like not that angle on the side there, really unattractive. But honestly, Nyama, for each of you for sharing. Each of you are so incredible, and I'm so lucky to, be able to interact with you guys in, many different spaces. And the work you do is so impactful and so important, for, us as Indigenous students, but also Indigenous researchers, paving this pathway, and like you're saying, for the future, for, these next 7 generations or the generations that have yet to come. And I think it's really, oh my God, I think it's really inspiring. Don't look, nobody look. It's really not great. Sorry, it was distracting. And I think as well, just like being a student myself, despite a lot of these barriers, the sort of the box at times this institution can, put you in. And I think it's so inspiring that just the way all of you are trying to just like pave this path for, for other students to kind of who are going to be coming and making it a little bit easier for them. And I think it's also just important to acknowledge even some of these memorable or your favorite moments throughout this process. And I just maybe wanted to ask, to whoever wants to answer, just like throughout your entire process, through your master's, your PhD, what has been maybe your favorite, your most memorable moment engaging and working alongside, your own communities?
I can start it off. I was gonna give some shout out. I was gonna give some shout outs anyway. So I wanted to just give some shout outs to the Buckskin Babes Collective. I mentioned already Autumn and Brooke, but also Dana Danger and Craig Commanda and Christopher Gabriel, we call him Scoden. And just like the community that we've built together. And I had the chance actually to do high tanning and parfleche residency in Banff, and they were focused on Buffalo. It was a Buffalo People's Arts Institute, and Lauren, who was one of the guys, like facilitators, Lauren and Jolie Big Eagle. I'm getting too casual, but he said like Buffalo builds kinship, and too, it's destiny. We saw your moose hide up there, like, and just seeing like, oh wow, look at the ripple effects of how it affected like destiny. So it was, and like that's also such a cool, and like also thanks to Hannah and the Ungwahoe Neha Research Chair at Concordia University for making that event possible, and also too to just Futures Research Center, to Skawanati and to Jason and just everyone who, and also to Daphne, one of my favorite times, we'll back it up. One of my favorite times, Lori Beavis was there for it. So we had, you guys weren't here earlier, but there was a call. So like the city of Montreal, they know about us and all of our high tanning business. And they're like, oh, we have this call of 145 deer in the eastern townships in Longueuil Park. And we're gonna have all these deer hides. And like the Commissioner of Indigenous Relations, they're trying so hard to like have a praxis, which we like to see, so lobby the city to give those guys more money. And they're like, would you guys want these hides? And we're like, of course we would, but we need storage, man. So they helped us. They were like, we'll buy your freezers. And it was just like such a whirlwind adventure. Like we're going out there, we're loading on all of these deer hides, and it's like down to the wire of, and like, I was like at a workshop, like that Hannah was facilitating. She's like, we're like, oh, where are we gonna put these freezers? Because B7 is an old building and they haven't, that's been Buckskin Babes' reciprocity to B7 is like, hey, Arrondissement Sud-Ouest, you gotta update their electricity because they didn't have the juice, because they have so many things going on there. They have a wood shop and just so many things are happening. So we couldn't even put our freezers at the base. And we're like, where are we gonna put these freezers? Hannah was like, Daphne. And at first I thought, this is an art gallery. What are you talking about? You guys are where's these freezers gonna go? But it's perfect. They have this huge industrial area in the back. And if you ever go on a Daphne tour, maybe you can see the freezers. But anyways, so just that whole process, it was just so stressful and wild, right down to the wire. Is this gonna get delivered in time? And we had to get C's, actually. They paid for the freezers, we have to reimburse them. And yeah, so this is the kind of adventures that, if you're bringing your research creation, your granddaddy community, and you're willing to get your hands dirty, it's the kind of stuff that you could, create.
Anyone else? No. I guess I'll just say my favorite moments. Thanks for your question, Alicia. Well, the beading circle at my that Selfies funded, that was definitely a highlight, a really special day. And just the interviewing process of getting to have conversations with the people involved in my project, that's been really meaningful. And yeah, not something that I take lightly to hear everyone's stories.
It's done.
It's done. No? Okay. Are there any other, do you want to share a favorite moment? Or?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, I think it's having the opportunity to meet all of these wonderful people that I'm sitting at the table with and that I've had chances to be in coursework with. So it's really the people. And these, PhD masters, it takes time. So life happens, and you really, you go through stuff together. And so the humanity and the care that's been shown toward me throughout this process has been really amazing. So I think it's just all of these moments with each of you. Yeah.
Any last chance for a question? Okay, so then I think, no? I think we're passing it to you for the last words. Is that correct? Yeah? Okay. Thank you.
Iako'tsi to all of you, and Iako'tsi to all of you. And we have some lists of people to say and remember.
Yes. So yeah, I also want to say thank you. It's been a really amazing event. Thank you guys for coming. Thank you everybody who's online now and joined us before for partaking in this with us again. It's, as we've said, it's our third year, which is kind of amazing that we're keeping it going. And
We're starting to get used to it.
and we're starting to get used to it. So hopefully you're starting to get used to it. So there will be another one next year.
It just gets better each
Yep,
time.
same time of the year. We'll come out with dates the next couple of months and let people put it on their calendar. So yeah, so we have some thank yous. So I'll start with our amazing IFRC team. So hands, I can't see anybody back there. Hands, Joel and Milo, they're all back there in the corner there. This was superbly organized. Hannah and I just had to check in every now and then.
Oh my gosh, those
and
emails
be
that
like,
just went out
this looks
regularly
great,
from
this looks
Joelle
great.
to just get all of the
Yep.
participants, get the bios, get this, everything. It's just amazing.
Yeah, so valuable to us in our schedules. So thank you very much.
Wonderful team at Fourth Space. You guys, we love working with you. It's such a pleasure. Doug, Bertie, Jax, it's like, it's just done. You know that it's done and it's done right when we work with you. So thank you so much.
Right. The equally wonderful folks at Shift who are hosting our reception afterwards. We appreciate them allowing us to take over their space for a little bit of time every now and then. They're really, really great hosts as well. I'll do Monica Melrenin, Philip Jacques, and their colleagues at the Office of Research, and Annie Jerin, Eldad Saberi, and their colleagues in the Office of the Dean of Fine Arts.
Yep. Applause. And I'm going to give a shout out to our colleagues at the Milieu Institute for Art, Culture, and Technology. We're really just a part of a larger community that is really a fantastic aspect of Concordia here. Bart Simon, Harry Smoke, and Mark Beaulieu. Thank you.
And to Jerwin, who is our photographer, around here somewhere, maybe right there, right in front of me, right there. Because everybody's looking back there. So thank you, Jerwin. And then, you want to do those?
Sure. Our collaborators, Aboriginal Territories in Cyberspace, otherwise known as ABTEC, Abundant Intelligences, First People Studies Program, Office of Community Engagement, Shift, again, Milieu, Dean of Fine Arts, and the Office of Research. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Yeah. And then, of course, for all of our amazing participants, our panelists, the students sharing your amazing work with us, our colleagues, it's really fantastic. It's a very different landscape here at Concordia than it was, say, 10 years ago in terms of the amount of activity around Indigenous research and research creation. And so it's really sort of heartening and frankly, kind of miraculous to be able to have 2 days worth of sort of experience with the amazing work you all are doing. And we could actually probably do it for another 2 days. So again, thank you all very much. Okay.
Okay, so we invite you all to come with us over to Shift. We've got a small reception happening there, and we can continue on the conversations.
Yeah, great. And Shift
Okay.
is right diagonal that way.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jason. Thank you, Hannah. Everyone online, we're going to be closing up the Zoom and the live stream now. Everything remains available on our YouTube channel. You should revisit it. All right.
go to shift. Have a great afternoon. Actually, have a great weekend.